It was a cold Monday night in New Hampshire, February 9th, 2004. A car, a black 1996 Saturn, spun out on a sharp turn on Route 112. It came to rest facing the wrong way, wedged into a snowbank. The driver was a young woman named Maura Murray. A local school bus driver, Butch Atwood, stopped. He asked if she was okay. He offered to call the police. She said no, she'd already called AAA. It was a small lie. There was no cell service in that area. She asked him not to call the police. He drove home anyway, just a short distance away, and called them. By the time a sheriff's cruiser arrived, maybe 10 or 15 minutes later, Maura Murray was gone. And she has been gone ever since. The scene left behind more questions than answers. The car was locked. Her wallet, phone, and keys were gone. But most of her belongings were still inside. In textbooks for her nursing classes, birth control pills, clothes. On the front seat, a box of wine. In the back, some alcohol she had bought earlier that day. The car's windshield was cracked and the airbags had deployed. But Maura was nowhere to be found. The police searched the woods, they brought in dogs. They found no tracks in the snow, no scent, no sign of a struggle. It was as if she had simply vanished into the thin, cold air. Over the years, theories have swirled. Did she succumb to the elements, wandering into the woods, disoriented and injured? Did a predator happen upon her at her most vulnerable moment, a monster driving that dark road? These are the dark possibilities, the ones that haunt her family and the investigators. But there is another theory. It's a theory that offers a sliver of hope, a sense of agency in a story that feels so random and cruel. It's the idea that Maura Murray didn't want to be found, that she used the accident as a jumping-off point for a new life. The voluntary disappearance theory. It's the belief that she walked away on purpose. To understand why this idea has such a strong hold, you have to look at the days and weeks leading up to her disappearance. Maura wasn't just a random college student. She was a West Point cadet before transferring to UMass Amherst to study nursing. She was a star athlete, a bright student, a daughter, a sister. From the outside, she seemed to have it all together. But under the surface, things were starting to unravel. Her life had become complicated. A few months before she vanished, she was caught using a stolen credit card number to order pizza. It was a minor offense, one that was supposed to be dismissed if she stayed out of trouble for 3 months. But it was a crack in the perfect facade. Then there was West Point. She had left after an incident involving shoplifting at the base commissary. It was another mark on a record she probably wanted to be spotless. She was a person who held herself to a high standard. These events must have felt like massive failures. The weekend before she disappeared was particularly strange. On Thursday night, she was on the phone with her sister, Kathleen. During the call, Maura suddenly became very quiet, then started crying. When Kathleen heard what sounded like someone else with her, the call ended abruptly. To this day, no one knows what that phone call was about, or who, if anyone, was with her. 2 nights later, on Saturday, she was at a party with her father, Fred. He had come to visit her. After the party, she borrowed his new car to drive back to her dorm. On the way, she crashed it. It wasn't a minor fender bender, it was a significant accident. The police came, but there were no charges filed. Still, it was another incident, another piece of bad luck or bad judgment piling up. Her father was planning to deal with the insurance paperwork on Monday, and then we get to Monday, the day she disappeared. She started the day by sending emails to her professors and her work supervisor. She told them there had been a death in the family, and she would be gone for a week. This was a lie. There was no death in the family. She was creating a window of time for herself. A week where no one would expect to see her. A week where no one would come looking. Her actions that day looked like a checklist for someone leaving. She packed a bag. Not just a change of clothes, but textbooks, toiletries, makeup. She took her birth control pills, which suggests she wasn't planning on harming herself. She went to an ATM and withdrew $280. It was almost all the money in her account. She stopped at a liquor store and bought Kahlua Baileys and a box of red wine. It's an odd purchase. Some see it as a party purchase, others as supplies for a lonely trip, and some even think it could have been a gift for someone she was planning to meet. She also made some strange calls. She called to check her own voicemail. She called a number for a condominium rental in Bartlett, New Hampshire, a place her family had vacationed before. She didn't speak to anyone, just listened to the recording. Then she got in her car and started driving north. She had printed out MapQuest directions to Burlington, Vermont, but she crashed in Woodsville, New Hampshire, a good distance away from that destination. When you put all these pieces together, it doesn't look like someone heading out for a short trip to clear her head. And it looks like someone running away. The lie about a death in the family. Packing her things. taking out all her money. It feels like a plan. The pressure was building, the credit card issue, the West Point incident, crashing her dad's car. Maybe she felt like she couldn't face the consequences. Maybe she was ashamed. Disappointing her father, a man she was very close to, might have been the final straw. So she ran. This is where the theory gets a critical component, the tandem driver. For Maura to disappear from a crash scene so quickly, without leaving a trace, she couldn't have done it alone. The bus driver, Butch Atwood, was gone for only a few minutes. Another neighbor saw the car and called the police, but didn't see anyone around it. The timeline is incredibly tight. It's hard to imagine her running into the dark, snowy woods and not leaving tracks. It's even harder to imagine her getting very far, especially if she was injured from the crash. The most logical explanation for her vanishing act is that someone picked her up. Someone was either following her in another car or someone was waiting for her nearby. This tandem driver is the key. If she had a partner, the entire escape plan becomes plausible. The crash could have been an unexpected hiccup, a moment of panic. She gets out of the car, shaken but able to walk. Her ride pulls up, she hops in, and they drive off into the night seconds before the police arrive. Who could this person be? It's the great unknown. Was it a secret boyfriend? An old friend from West Point? Someone she met online who promised her a new life? Her family and friends have been questioned extensively and no one has come forward. No one seems to know of any secret person in her life, but people have secrets. Especially a 21-year-old woman feeling trapped. Maybe she had a life no one knew about. The idea that she had help also explains some of the other oddities. The $280 she withdrew isn't enough to start a new life, but it's enough to get you to a safe location where someone else is waiting with more resources. The destination of Burlington, Vermont, is very close to the Canadian border. Canada is a classic destination for people trying to disappear. It's a vast country where it would be relatively easy to get lost, start over with a new name, a new identity. Maybe the plan was never to stay in New Hampshire or Vermont. Maybe the goal was always to cross the border. The proponents of this theory point to Maura's character. She was tough. She was a runner. She was disciplined and intelligent. She had survived the rigors of West Point. If anyone had the mental and physical fortitude to pull off a disappearance, it would be someone like her. She wasn't a fragile person who would crumble at the first sign of trouble. She was a survivor. This image of her as a strong, capable woman makes the idea of her taking control of her own destiny, however drastic the method, more believable. It's a compelling narrative. A young woman, cornered by her mistakes and the pressure to be perfect, decides to wipe the slate clean. She engineers a clean break. She leaves her old life behind like a snakeskin and starts anew somewhere far away. It's a story of desperation, but also one of empowerment. It's a story where she is the author of her own fate, not a victim of a random crime or a tragic accident. For her family, this theory must be a strange mix of comfort and pain. On one hand, it means she could still be alive. She could be out there living, breathing, maybe even happy. On the other hand, it means she chose to leave them. She chose to inflict this unending pain of not knowing. It means the daughter and sister they loved made a conscious decision to vanish from their lives forever. But as compelling as the voluntary disappearance theory is, it has serious problems. For every piece of evidence that seems to support it, there's a counter-argument that makes you doubt everything. The theory is built on a foundation of maybes and what-ifs, and when you look closely, the cracks start to show. First, let's talk about the logistics of disappearing. It's not like in the movies. In 2004, the world was already very connected. It's incredibly difficult to create a new identity from scratch. You need a new social security number, a new birth certificate, a new driver's license. Without these, you can't get a legal job, rent an apartment, open a bank account, or see a doctor. You would be forced to live completely off the grid in the shadows. This requires a network of people willing to help you or a set of skills most people don't have. How would a 21-year-old nursing student from Massachusetts pull this off? And if she had a new identity, she would have had to be incredibly careful. For 20 years, her face has been everywhere. It's been on the news, on television shows, on websites and forums dedicated to her case. Someone somewhere would have recognized her. A coworker, a neighbor, a friend. Yet, in all these years, there has not been a single credible, verified sighting of Maura Murray. There have been tips, of course. A possible sighting in a Montreal bar. A woman who looked like her in a convenience store. But none of them have ever led to anything concrete. It's as if she truly ceased to exist. To remain unseen for 2 decades takes an almost impossible level of discipline and luck. Then there is the issue of her family. By all accounts, she was close to them. She loved her father. She talked to her sister regularly. The idea that she would voluntarily cut off all contact, knowing the agony it would cause them, is hard to reconcile with the person everyone described. People who choose to disappear often leave a note or make a secret phone call years later to let their family know they're okay. Maura did nothing. There has been complete and total silence. Would she really be that cold? Could she live with herself knowing her family was searching for her, fearing the worst, for years on end? It seems like a heavy psychological burden to carry. The crash itself is one of the biggest arguments against a planned disappearance. If you want to vanish quietly, a car crash is a terrible way to do it. It's loud. It's public. It guarantees that the police will be on their way within minutes. It leaves a huge piece of evidence behind your car, filled with your belongings for investigators to pore over. It introduces chaos and unpredictability into what would need to be a very precise plan. If the goal was to meet a tandem driver and disappear, why not just park the car somewhere discreet, leave the keys in it, and walk away? Why stage a messy, attention-grabbing accident on a rural highway? It makes no sense as part of a deliberate plan. It looks much more like what it probably was, an actual accident. A girl, upset and maybe drinking, driving too fast on an icy road, loses control. The crash wasn't the plan, it was the event that ruined the plan. And what about the money? If she had a secret accomplice, maybe they had money. But if she was on her own, that cash would have run out very quickly. What was her plan after that? It's a huge hole in the theory. People who successfully disappear often plan for months or years. They save money, they create a new identity ahead of time, they have a solid destination in mind. Maura's actions seem more impulsive, more chaotic. It feels less like a well-thought-out escape and more like a desperate, last-minute flight. Let's also reconsider her state of mind. While the pressure she was under might be a motive for running away, it could also be a motive for something else. A person who feels like a failure, who has just crashed their dad's car, who is in trouble at school, and who might have other secrets we don't know about, is a person in crisis. A crisis can lead to irrational decisions. It could lead to a decision to run away. But it could also lead to a person being vulnerable, not thinking clearly, and making a fatal mistake. Maybe the plan was never to disappear forever. Maybe the plan was just to get away for a few days. She lied to her professors to buy some time. She packed her things and drove north to a place she knew, the White Mountains, to think, to decompress. The alcohol was for a lonely weekend in a motel. The crash was an accident. And what happened after the crash is the real mystery. Perhaps, dazed and scared of getting a DUI, she decided to run from the scene. She flagged down a passing car, and the person who stopped was not a good Samaritan. They were a predator. They offered her a ride, and she got in, desperate to get away before the police arrived. And that was it. She got into the wrong car with the wrong person. In this scenario, her preparations for a trip away were real, but her permanent disappearance was not part of the plan. Or maybe, in that same state of panic, she did run into the woods. She was a runner. She was tough. Maybe she thought she could cut through the woods and get back to a main road. But it was dark. It was cold. There was deep snow. She could have been injured from the crash. She could have been drinking. She could have gotten lost, fallen, and succumbed to hypothermia within hours. Her body could still be out there, in the vast wilderness of the White Mountains, hidden in a place the searchers just haven't found yet. The dogs didn't pick up a scent, but weather conditions can affect that. It's not a foolproof science. These alternative theories, foul play, or death by misadventure, are dark and tragic. They offer no hope. That's why the voluntary disappearance theory persists. It's a story with a living protagonist. It allows for the possibility of a future for Maura. It's a more comfortable thought than imagining her final moments being filled with fear or pain. There have been attempts to find evidence for a new life. Armchair detectives have scoured the internet for clues. There was a photo from a Quebec bar that showed a woman who looked strikingly like Maura. It generated a lot of excitement, but it was ultimately determined not to be her. Every lead has turned into a dead end. The trail has remained cold for 2 decades. So, where does that leave us? The voluntary disappearance theory is a perfect mystery. It's plausible enough to be believed, but not proven enough to be true. It's an intricate web of clues that can be interpreted in multiple ways. The emails and the packed bags look like a plan to leave, but they could also be the actions of a young woman planning a short, desperate getaway that went horribly wrong. The tandem driver explains her vanishing act, but there is zero evidence that such a person ever existed. It's a ghost in the machine, a necessary character to make the story work, but one who has never been seen or heard from. Her strength and intelligence suggest she could pull it off, but that same strength could have led her to believe she could survive a reckless run into the frozen woods, a fatal miscalculation. The lack of a body seems to support the idea that she's alive, but the woods in that part of New Hampshire are vast and unforgiving. People have gone missing there and have never been found. Ultimately, the theory that Maura Murray started a new life is a story we tell ourselves because the alternatives are too grim to accept. It's a theory born of hope. The hope that a bright young woman wasn't the victim of a random, brutal crime. The hope that her life didn't end in a cold, lonely snowbank. The hope that somewhere out there she found the peace that was eluding her in 2004. But it's just that a story, it's a compelling one, and it fits some of the facts. But it ignores some of the other, more inconvenient facts. The lack of money. The illogic of the crash. The deafening silence for 20 years. The sheer, almost impossible difficulty of erasing your past and starting over. Maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. Maybe she did intend to disappear, but only for a little while. Maybe she had help, but her helper wasn't part of a grand plan for a new life in Canada. Maybe they were just a friend who was supposed to help her lie low for a week. And maybe something happened to both of them. The case of Maura Murray endures because it's a void. And into that void we project our own ideas, fears, and hopes. The voluntary disappearance theory fills that void with a story of control, of escape, of survival. It's a powerful narrative. But after all these years, it remains an idea without proof. A ghost story whispered on the internet. The sad reality is that we just don't know. We don't know what was in her head that day as she drove north. We don't know if she was running towards something or just running away. All we know is that on a cold February night, a young woman's life veered off course and she disappeared from the map. Whether she drew a new map for herself or fell off the edge of the world is a question that may never be answered. And the not knowing is the hardest part of all.